We've been told that we choose our own actions. Every day we make decisions, weigh options and take responsibility for what we do. But what if science says that choice is only a story your brain tells you after the decision has already been made? Today we'll examine one of the oldest questions in philosophy and one of the most controversial in neuroscience. By the end, you'll see neither science nor philosophy has managed to settle the question of free will. Physics, Consciousness and Reality, Dickie Dredd and Nigel Adams. And we are on part 38 in the video series. This is chapter 5, Ethics, Free Will and Human Life. And we're on section 35, Free Will, Science and Philosophy at Odds. Yet another huge question that hangs over everything we've been talking about is free will. Are we actually making choices, or are we just passengers watching a train roll down tracks laid long before we were born? Science and philosophy has been wrestling with this one for centuries, and the answers don't come easily. From a scientific standpoint, free will looks shaky. Neuroscience experiments by Benjamin Libet in the 1980s suggested that the brain begins preparing to act milliseconds before people report consciously deciding. Later studies extended this, showing measurable brain activity seconds before the subject feels that I chose that moment. In other words, the conscious mind may not be the driver. It may be the commentator, stepping in after the fact to tell the story about what it decided. Physics doesn't offer much help either. Classical mechanics is deterministic. Given initial conditions, the future unfolds inexorably, like clockwork. If that's true, then every decision we make was set in motion long ago, back at the Big Bang. Quantum mechanics throws in randomness, but randomness isn't freedom. A roulette wheel of probabilities doesn't give you agency, just adds noise. From a strict scientific lens, then, free will seems like an illusion. A useful one, maybe, but still an illusion. The body acts, the brain processes, and consciousness takes the credit. Western philosophy splits into camps over this. The hard determinists bite the bullet. No free will. Everything's caused. Responsibility is a social fiction. Then there are the libertarians, not the political ones, the metaphysical ones, who insist that real choice exists and isn't reducible to physics. But they struggle to explain how that choice fits into a naturalistic world without appealing to some form of magic. In the middle, you've got the compatibilists. They argue that free will and determinism can coexist if you define freedom not as absolute ability to do otherwise, but as acting according to your desires and reasons without coercion. In other words, you're free to do what you want, even if what you want was itself determined by prior causes. It's a neat solution, but for many it feels like a sleight of hand. It doesn't answer the gut question, could I have done otherwise? From the subjective side, though, the experience of choice is undeniable. We feel ourselves weighing options, deciding, taking responsibility. Just like morality, the lived experience doesn't match the cold reduction. And again, this hints at the same deeper puzzle to free will. Is free will a trick of neurons or a window into something physics can't yet see? Some philosophers suggest that the whole debate may be misframed. If the self is an illusion, then the question of whether I have free will is already skewed. Maybe there's no separate agent at all, just reality unfolding, with the sense of choice as one of its features. Others say consciousness itself might bend causality in ways we don't yet understand, introducing a kind of agency that science hasn't captured. So where does that leave us? From science, free will looks like a story the brain tells itself. From philosophy, it's either impossible, illusory, or redefined into something tamer. From lived experience, it feels utterly real. And once again, we're staring into the same gap between cold explanation and undeniable texture of being alive. Perhaps free will isn't something we either possess or lack. Perhaps it's another example of the gap between objective explanation and subjective experience, a gap we've encountered throughout this book. But if your choices are determined, or even bigger questions immediately follows, can we still hold people responsible for what they do? In the next video, we'll explore whether justice, morality and accountability can survive if free will is only an illusion. So we're still in Chapter 5, Ethics, Free Will and the Human Life, and we'll move on to Section 36, Justice and Responsibility. Can systems work without free will?